Kim Kardashian is getting dragged, and it's coming straight from her own co-stars. Yeah, the people she worked with on set are basically saying she's got zero talent and needs to be humble. And the way they're talking about her performance? Let's just say it's polite on the surface, but the shade underneath is impossible to miss. Before we get into all of it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss these stories. Because once you hear what they actually said, you'll see the whole situation in a completely different light. Here's the setup. Kim's latest series, All's Fair, was supposed to be her big moment. She produced it herself, shopped it around, and really shaped it as a project that would put her front and center. It's a Ryan Murphy production, which already carries some weight in Hollywood. And she managed to bring in heavyweight actors like Glenn Close, Naomi Watts, Niecy Nash, and Paula. On paper, it sounds like a dream cast, but there's a reason people are talking, and it's not just the bad reviews. The series got a brutal reception. Critics were merciless. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 3% rating, and some called it existentially terrible. Yet Kim's team quickly pointed to the show being #1 on Hulu, trying to spin the narrative that it's a success. But here's the thing. The audience isn't necessarily convinced, and the co-stars aren't exactly singing praises behind the cameras either. Glenn Close, in particular, gave some remarks that were subtle but sharp. She noted that the first 3 episodes were weak, and she implied it was because Kim, who was supposed to be the star, is the focus during those early episodes. Once she becomes less central, the show apparently improves. In other words, the show only works when Kim isn't the main focus. And that's a shade-filled observation if there ever was one. But here's where it gets really interesting. Glenn Close did acknowledge a few positive things about Kim. She said Kim always knew her lines, was never late, and was prepared on set. That sounds good, right? Except the way she framed it makes it clear. Kim is not talented in the traditional acting sense, but she's smart enough to surround herself with people who are. She had no pretensions about being a great actress, which meant she didn't make things difficult for the seasoned actors she was working with. Essentially, her humility, or maybe her awareness of her limits, was the only reason she could exist in that environment without conflict. It's almost like Glenn was saying, I didn't hate working with her because she's genuinely good. I tolerated it because she knew her place. And that's where the zero talent and needs to be humble narrative really comes from. Kim's co-stars weren't trying to publicly shame her in a dramatic way, but their comments paint a picture that's hard to ignore. And you have to consider the larger context. Kim's role as producer meant she had financial control. She effectively made a show to boost herself as the star. For someone like Glenn Close, who spent decades earning her reputation through craft and dedication, that dynamic is naturally going to raise eyebrows. You're essentially asking people who've worked hard in the industry to adjust to someone who didn't necessarily earn the same credibility through acting skill, but through influence and money. That dynamic is subtle but pervasive throughout the feedback. Glenn hinted at it when she mentioned that Kim's seriousness of intent surprised her. She's consistent, prepared, and dedicated, but that doesn't equal talent. It equals discipline. And in Hollywood, talent and discipline aren't the same thing. You can be the most prepared person on set and still deliver wooden or unconvincing performances. The irony here is palpable. Kim has built her career on being a savvy businessperson, a media presence, and a reality TV star. But when it comes to acting in a scripted drama, the co-star's remarks suggest she simply doesn't have the natural skill set to carry the show herself. Glenn Close didn't say it directly, but between the lines, it's clear. Kim is fortunate the show is constructed around ensemble pieces and that her focus diminishes as the story progresses. Otherwise, the cracks would be even more obvious. There's another angle worth noting. The critics are merciless, but part of the negativity also comes from Kim's public persona. She and her family have a very specific reputation in the media, and not everyone likes it. Glenn pointed out that the Kardashians' image likely contributed to the backlash. The family's brand is huge, yes, but it also carries baggage. So even if Kim had delivered a flawless performance, the preconceived notions about her may have influenced both critics and viewers alike. This interplay between talent, perception, and public image makes the situation fascinating. Kim might have money, influence, and access, but none of that automatically grants her respect as an actress. And her co-stars' remarks underline that reality without ever explicitly saying she can't act. Instead, they frame it as, she's smart, prepared, humble, but she's not a natural performer, which is a polite way of dragging someone and still keeping it professional. And then there's the nuance of her production role. Because Kim produced the show, she's essentially paying to be front and center. Glenn Close hinted that without Kim's financial backing, she herself might never have agreed to participate. That's a subtle way of saying, Kim's influence got her into rooms she might not have reached on merit alone. Again, it's not hostile, but the shade is undeniable. Now, all of this is further complicated by Kim's personal drive. She's someone who wants to be seen as serious, competent, and in control. She invests herself in projects to boost her credibility, and that includes working alongside people far more experienced than she is. Yet, the co-star's observations suggest that while she may be disciplined, she hasn't yet mastered the craft of acting in the same way. That gap between effort and natural skill is exactly what fuels the criticism, both subtly from co-stars and overtly from critics. And it's not just Glenn Close. The narrative from other cast members reinforces similar points. They mention her preparedness and professionalism, which is fair. She shows up and does her work. But that same professionalism contrasts sharply with the quality of her performance. There's a difference between showing up and truly delivering. And it's that difference that makes the co-stars shade land so effectively. They're essentially saying, she works hard, but talent isn't something you can buy or produce. And let's not forget the audience's role. Many viewers were curious when they saw Kim headlining a cast with names like Naomi Watts and Niecy Nash. How did this happen? How does someone with her background get such a cast on board? The answer, of course, is her role as producer and financier. She built the vehicle herself. And that, again, is where the tension lies. The actors are talented and respected, and the star in question is there partly because of money and influence, not pure craft. All of this builds a picture that's both fascinating and uncomfortable. Kim is successful, yes, but in this particular space, acting in a scripted drama, her co-stars see her limitations, and rather than being cruel, they're honest. They acknowledge her effort, they acknowledge her professionalism, but they also make it clear that she's not there because of raw talent. And that's exactly the subtle shade that's making headlines now. But it doesn't stop there. The series itself has structural issues that magnify this perception. The first 3 episodes, where Kim is most central, are widely regarded as the weakest. After that, the focus shifts and the show improves. That fact alone fuels the narrative. The show only works when Kim isn't the primary focus. It's a quiet way of pointing out that she doesn't carry the series on her own, which circles back to the needs to be humble angle in the title. And the way the co-stars frame it is key. They never attack her publicly or in a sensationalist way. They simply state observations. She's prepared, she knows her lines, she's serious, but she's not a natural actor. That subtlety is what makes the commentary sting more. It's the polite, professional kind of drag that lands harder than a dramatic public meltdown ever could. At the same time, this situation underscores a larger truth about Hollywood and celebrity culture. Money, influence, and fame can get you into rooms, but they don't automatically grant you the respect that comes from skill and craft. Kim is learning that the hard way, not through public ridicule, but through quiet, honest assessments from people who've been in the industry for decades. And that's why this story has legs. The co-stars' remarks are a window into a world that most viewers rarely see. How seasoned professionals perceive someone who has influence and money, but hasn't yet earned the same kind of respect through talent alone. That combination of effort, access, and limitation is what makes this so intriguing. The takeaway: Kim Kardashian is disciplined, prepared, and aware of her limitations. She's smart enough to surround herself with people who elevate the material. But talent is not something you can produce, buy, or negotiate. And her co-stars, particularly Glenn Close, aren't shy about acknowledging that in the most professional, subtle way possible. So yes, Kim is being dragged, but it's the quiet insider kind of drag. One that makes you rethink everything you see on screen and question the difference between effort, influence, and real skill. And it's that contrast that keeps the conversation alive, leaving fans and critics alike debating what it really means to be good in Hollywood, and whether Kim's presence in this space is justified by talent or by circumstance. And as this unfolds, it becomes clear that the tension isn't just about acting. It's about influence, perception, reputation, and the ways that money and status interact with craft. Kim's co-stars aren't trying to humiliate her. They're simply stating the truth as they see it. But for fans and the public, it's impossible not to interpret that truth as a subtle drag, one that cuts deeper than any headline ever could. And with that, the stage is set. Kim's series continues to draw attention, not just for what's on screen, but for what's being said behind it. The co-stars' remarks, the critics' reviews, and the public perception all combine into a story that's far more complex than a simple good or bad rating. And if you think the drama ends there, well, it doesn't. Because in the world of celebrity, perception can be just as powerful as reality, and the narrative around Kim Kardashian's talent or lack thereof is still evolving. The public reaction has been just as fascinating. Fans are divided. Some defend Kim, pointing to her discipline and professionalism, while others are openly agreeing with the subtle drag. They're saying what a lot of people behind the scenes already hinted at, that Kim's influence and money got her this role, but talent? That's still a work in progress. What makes this even more interesting is the way Kim handles it. She's never been someone to ignore criticism completely, but she also doesn't panic over it. Instead, she leans into her brand, promotes the show as #1 on Hulu, and emphasizes her role as producer. But here's the takeaway. Kim's series isn't failing solely because of her performance. There are structural issues, pacing concerns, and yes, the unavoidable baggage of the Kardashian brand. Yet, the co-stars' comments make it clear that talent gaps matter. Preparation can get you so far, but natural skill, nuance, and range are what make a performance resonate. And for Kim, that's the challenge she still faces. If you've been following this story, it's easy to see why the conversation isn't going away anytime soon. The combination of high-profile co-stars, critical reviews, and fan reactions makes this one of the most talked-about celebrity moments in recent memory. And whether you're Team Kim or just here for the drama, there's no denying the tension is real. So if you want to stay updated on every angle of this story, from co-star remarks to audience reactions and everything in between, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We break down the drama, the subtleties, and the behind-the-scenes truths so you get the full picture without the fluff.